In intent possession. The main idea of possession in the FNAF universe is that you're around the object you're possessing, whether it be an animatronic, a toy, or a person. My question is, how would Crying Child have been around Golden Freddy if he dies in a hospital, as we hear thanks to the flatline at the end of FNAF 4? Cause like, it's either he's possessing William or Golden Freddy. So assuming the Crying Child dies in the hospital, as we're led to believe, how would Golden Freddy be close enough to actually get possessed? While yes, agony reaches out further from the body than any other emotion, it doesn't reach out that far. Not from the hospital to the pizzeria where you got your head squashed. The closest thing that we know ends up getting possessed by something is his father, which makes the most sense if he dies in the hospital. While you could argue that he died in Fredbear's mouth, there wouldn't be a need for IV, flowers, and pills, along with a heart monitor if he was dead from the moment that the animatronic bit down. So we know he didn't die in Fredbear's mouth. And at 9, limitations. We also see limitations of possessions other than actually being within proximity of the animatronic or object you possess. With what we've learned about agony and possession in the FNAF universe, nobody can really possess multiple large things at once. Sure, you can possess multiple small objects, as we see in the end of The Man in Room 1280, I believe is the story where that happens, but nobody has been able to possess multiple large or big ticket items like animatronics or people at once. This leads me to the conclusion that Cassidy and Crying Child have to be possessing two different things. Cassidy cannot be possessing Golden Freddy and William, and neither can Crying Child. So Crying Child is either Golden Freddy or the one you should not have killed. But we know that Cassidy is Golden Freddy thanks to the Happiest Day minigame Easter egg from the survival logbook. On the page asking about your happiest day, we can see the puppet giving a cake to a young girl with black hair. This same girl can be seen described in the FNAF novels and is named Cassidy. This, combined with the Happiest Day minigame revolving around setting Golden Freddy soul free, indicates that Cassidy has been set free thanks to the good ending not showing the Golden Freddy head in the background. So, if she's Golden Freddy, Crying Child has to be possessing William. And at 8, Fredbear. One of the biggest points I see as to why Crying Child is Golden Freddy or part of Golden Freddy is because Fredbear gets turned into Golden Freddy. What? When was this mentioned? Because I don't recall this ever being a fact in the games, especially never confirmed. Like, it's just the theory that perhaps Golden Freddy was just Fredbear repurposed or something like that. However, if we're being honest, William would not have reused the animatronic that killed his son. Okay? He would have destroyed it. Plus, the shapes of Golden Freddy and Fredbear are way too different to actually have them be the same animatronic. Freddy's proportions are much smaller than Fredbear's because Fredbear is a spring-lock suit, so it would have to have enough room for a human and all the robot parts to be tucked away. Golden Freddy just doesn't have enough room for that, and it's a suit with no endoskeleton, so they cannot be the same animatronic. So Crying Child would either be Fredbear or the one you should not have killed, and Fredbear was nowhere near Crying Child when he dies in the hospital, unless they're just a really crappy hospital. And at 7, Glamrock Freddy. This is definitely not the strongest point, but it's something that I felt like was worth mentioning anyway. The character of Glamrock Freddy in Security Breach is the first animatronic to help us not die in the series, and based on Funko statues, the animatronic's belly will open up and allow us to climb inside. This made many people compare Glamrock Freddy and Gregory to Crying Child and Foxy Bro. However, I don't think that this is actually a good example. I mean, I've done it myself, but I mean, let's be honest. Do Mike and his brother really have that good of a relationship? Do they seem like the kind of brothers to stick by each other's side like they're the Winchesters? Or do they look like they're the kind of brothers who would shove each other into animatronic mouths for a laugh, resulting in the brutal, albeit accidental, death of their younger sibling? Exactly. Instead, what if this hiding inside the animatronic thing is actually meant to be representing William and Crying Child? It could make sense, given that Crying Child would have thought his dad was trying to help him at first too, only to feel betrayed when he realized what was actually going on. And William is the only other character we know to have someone hiding inside them other than other animatronics. Just saying. And at 6, Released. At this point, Cassidy's soul has been released following the events of the Happiest Day minigame. We can even see this be proven to us in the survival logbook, which revealed Cassidy's name, since like I said, on the page talking about your happiest day, we see the puppet giving cake to a little girl who was drawn exactly how Cassidy is described in the book series. And the FNAF 3 endings also support this, since in the bad ending we can see the light on in Golden Freddy's head, you know, the one light that splashes to both eyes, and in the good ending that light isn't on anymore. So while some people think that she's not at rest due to her head not being there, we couldn't see her head even if the light was on. Like we could only see it from the inside. So it being there, just in pitch black, is totally plausible and honestly expected. That's just how light works, and it's stupid to ignore the basic laws of the universe. Sure, we can have possessed robots, okay, that's fine, but nothing about that is going to change how light works. Okay, that's too much, even for Five Nights at Freddy's. They should really fix those damn doors though. Halfway through in at number 5, Andrew. The one you should not have killed ends up making an appearance in the Fazbear Frights books. Well, a version of the character does, since this one is named Andrew and is wearing an alligator mask. However, this version has way more in common with Crying Child than they do with Cassidy. Firstly, they're both male characters with dark hair. Secondly, Andrew at one point appears as a shadow as described in the story, and Nightmare in Ultimate Custom Night says, quote, "The shadow fears me," which could be what this moment in the book was referencing, since Ultimate Custom Night takes place during the events of the Man in Room 1280, only allowing William to wake up when he manages to survive. Either way, Andrew has more in common with Crying Child, which makes sense given that these books are meant to clear things up from the games so that we can move ahead with the lore. So the introduction of Andrew was clearly meant to demonstrate that Crying Child is the one you should not have killed. And at 4, He. When looking at Ultimate Custom Night, we find a lot of information about the one you should not have killed, since, you know, they were introduced. Lines that also refer to the one you should not have killed call him a he, which some wrote off as confusion because of the animatronic Cassidy inhabits, but there is no way that they would call a spirit by their animatronic gender identity, okay? They'd be a spirit, not an animatronic. This has always bothered me. Because if Cassidy was possessing both William and Golden Freddy, she would still want to be referred to as Cassidy when not inside Golden Freddy, especially if Cassidy is really as vengeful as we thought, since, you know, being called by the thing that you get stuffed into after being brutally murdered probably isn't gonna make a spirit too happy. Getting close to the end in number 3, Nightmare Animatronics. The appearance of the Nightmare Animatronics as well in Ultimate Custom Night is another indicator that the one you should not have killed is Crying Child. Since FNAF 4 ends with Crying Child dying, who else would know about the Nightmare Animatronics that are literally nightmares? Nobody, especially not Cassidy. If Cassidy is the one you should not have killed, how would she have known what the Nightmare Animatronics look like to have them torture William in Ultimate Custom Night? She just wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't make sense. The presence of the Nightmare Animatronics in Ultimate Custom Night and after means that the one you should not have killed had to know what they look like. And since Crying Child saw them in a nightmare while in a coma and died after he saw them there is no possible way anyone else could know what they look like. They have a stomach mouth, probably because Crying Child saw Elizabeth get gotten by a baby, which would realistically make him fear the animatronics and the animatronic stomachs in case they also have a surprise claw that will eat you. It's just, you know, it's the only thing that makes sense. And if you think that FNAF 4 isn't a dream, click up in the top right corner because we have a whole video about that. And ultimately, in at number 2, literary symmetry. Just like how Chuck had Jessica die in the same way as Mary Winchester in Supernatural, it seems that Scott Cawthon is taking that same idea and applying it to Five Nights at Freddy's. Also, can you tell I've been watching a lot of Supernatural? Since if we think about it, Crying Child and William are both put in the same position in their respective games. FNAF 4 has Crying Child lying in a coma, dying in the hospital, and Ultimate Custom Night has William laying in a coma, dying in the hospital, but also not dying because he's being possessed. Either way, they're both dealing with roughly the same thing, and I think that's why we got the Man in Room 1280, since Scott wanted to clarify that William wasn't in hell, but rather in a coma much like his son. It's great storytelling, and it's not something that you can say Scott wouldn't do. In fact, Scott probably thought about this as soon as FNAF 4 was released, and thought that that's how William would have to end as well. Death like your son, but make it a little spicy, you know? That's basically what Scott did, and it only serves as more evidence. There's no way it's a coincidence. Not in FNAF. In a fan base that is literally comparing hexadecimal color codes. There's no way that's a coincidence. Finally, in at number 1, Ultimate Custom Night voice lines. Finally, we come to one of the biggest pieces of evidence I feel proves that Crying Child is the one you should not have killed. So it's pretty well established at this point that in Ultimate Custom Night, the death lines are just the animatronics repeating what the one you should not have killed says, as we can see with the mediocre melodies, because, you know, we can hear the one you should not have killed behind them. And the voice casting was supposed to work as a young boy or a young girl. However, a majority of these lines end up having something to do with Crying Child. This is even even more pertinent since we don't know a lot about Cassidy, so these being personalized is a very important detail. And then we have the addition of lines like, "I am remade, but not by you, by the one you should not have killed," and "I have always been hiding in your shadow," and most importantly, "Let me put you back together and take you apart all over again." All of these are references to the crying child. "I am remade" references William's promise to put his son back together as his child, and as his child, crying child would be in William's shadow to hide, since his father would make him feel protected, at least at first. And I don't think that we need an explanation for "let me put you back together," which I guess if you want one, is also a reference to that famous FNAF 4 line. But the thing is, how would anyone else know these things? Cassidy would have no way of knowing, and why would they talk about it if they did? Clearly, the one saying these lines has a bone to pick about this, and that person is Crying Child.
Number 10. 2 Fredbears. Some believe that Golden Freddy is one Fredbear, whereas Nightmare is another Fredbear. The theory also suggests that both of these animatronics have ties to, or were once, a version of Fredbear. So both in a sense are Fredbear while also being separate from him. They are all collectively Fredbears, but also their own entity. The question remains, of course, if there are 2 Fredbears, have they always both existed, or was only one of them the original Fredbear? It is possible that although we have only ever seen one Fredbear on the screen at a time, there could be multiple Fredbears out there who each evolved to become something different, with one of them becoming known as Golden Freddy and the other becoming known as the more ghostly version Yellow Bear, who then perhaps goes on to become Nightmare. Number 9. Many Fredbears. It has been theorized that there is more than one Spring Bonnie suit. Some fans believe the original suit was actually locked away or destroyed, whereas the other suit that would go on to become Springtrap in William Afton's prison was actually his own personal suit. Then again, we also have seen what appears to be a slightly different version of a bunny costume, which could also be a version of Spring Bonnie in the Help Wanted game, which is worn by the entity we know as Glitchtrap. If there are multiple Spring Bonnies, it seems more than likely that there are multiple Fredbear animatronics out there, or even potentially Springlock suit versions of Fredbear. I'm not sure if Fredbear is a Springlock or not, but could be. If so, that would play well into the previous theory of there being multiple versions of Fredbear who evolved to be different entities and potentially even different Golden Freddys. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Fredbear and all of the possible theories out there as to who Fredbear could be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. The star of the show. What if Fredbear isn't Golden Freddy but another famous bear that we all know very well? That's right, what if Fredbear is actually Freddy Fazbear? I know that these two bears look very different, I know, but it could be possible that Golden Freddy is a completely separate animatronic and instead Freddy is the one who was once Fredbear. The evidence we have for this is the commonality between the two characters. Fredbear was the star and title character of Fredbear's Diner. Freddy Fazbear is the star and title character of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Could it then be possible that Fredbear was actually transformed or remodeled into something completely new, or something sort of new? Instead of being tossed away or relegated to the shadows, what if Fredbear was given a new look and new name as time went on and instead became Freddy Fazbear? Number 7. Fredbear is Fredbear. Even more terrifying would be the theory that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are actually separate entities, same with Freddy and Fredbear, and that Fredbear is actually a completely unique animatronic. Now, why would this be so scary? Well, it would mean so many of us were wrong in our theories, especially the theories about Fredbear being Golden Freddy. It would also mean that there are even more animatronics potentially roaming around out there. That is assuming that Fredbear is still active. If Fredbear was active though, that is one more animatronic to worry about, one more anthropomorphic bear animatronic too. Does that make it more scary? I don't know, but bears in the wild are certainly scary to run into, so perhaps bear animatronics are also more vicious and terrifying by comparison. I know not too many people are afraid of Freddy out there in the world, but I'm just saying, bears are pretty scary creatures. You do not want to fight a bear. Number 6. Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy is a much more popular character than Fredbear when it comes to the fan base, and perhaps that is why the community has tried to give Fredbear more meaning by tying them more closely to Golden Freddy. The evidence cited for these two being one and the same ultimately comes down to appearances. Golden Freddy appears to look similar to Fredbear, and the animatronic is in a state of disrepair, which many think could be because Fredbear is such an old animatronic. Fredbear is also thought of as a yellow bear ultimately, and so is Golden Freddy. In fact, Golden Freddy in the first game has the file name Yellow Bear, so while it's not anything super concrete, a color is a color, and that's a fact. Number 5. Cassidy. There are so many theories when it comes to who exactly possesses Golden Freddy, whom some believe to be Fredbear. One such theory is that Cassidy is the one who possesses the lesser seen animatronic. Cassidy is a bit of a confusing character, but is ultimately one of the people, if not the only person, that fans theorize is possessing Golden Freddy. At least if we're talking about the games. Once you include the books, it gets a heck of a lot more complicated, because in the books there are other characters associated with Golden Freddy, and kind of multiple characters too, if we're talking about Fazbear Frights and then the novel trilogy as well. Number 4. Destroyed. What if Fredbear isn't anyone because the animatronic actually doesn't even exist anymore? At least, not in a physical sense. Many people theorize after Fredbear's role in the Bite of 83 that the animatronic was completely scrapped and destroyed. If that were to be true, it opens up a whole other realm of spooky possibilities. What if Fredbear wasn't repurposed or didn't evolve to become a new entity but is simply a ghost? This would help to explain some other mysterious things that we know about Fredbear. Or I suppose possibly Golden Freddy. After all, what if Golden Freddy was still Fredbear in disrepair and then later Fredbear after death? What if that's what Golden Freddy is? Number 3. Teleportation. Let's say that Fredbear is Golden Freddy. In that case, this would mean that either in death or possibly also just in life, if the animatronic is still considered to exist and not be a ghost, that Fredbear can teleport. At least that would be true if 1. You believe that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are one in the same, and 2. If you believe that Golden Freddy could teleport. Based on the fact that Golden Freddy is kind of a bonus animatronic in the first game who doesn't so much move into the office as simply randomly appear there, and also in FNAF 2 kind of also randomly appears places, many believe that Golden Freddy is actually capable of teleportation. Now, is this a ghost skill though, or is it something that has always been built into the suit? Well, based on FNAF 2, I think we would assume it was the suit. If it was always around, that means these suits in general are capable of being a lot more deadly and terrifying than we could have ever imagined. Talk about state of the art. Number 2. The flesh remains. Some believe that Crying Child, and not Cassidy, possesses Golden Freddy and thereby Fredbear. However, it's also possible that the two could share the animatronic, or that Fredbear is possessed by Cece whereas Golden Freddy is possessed by Cassidy alone. Crying Child, however, is intrinsically linked to Fredbear due to the Bite of 83. Crying Child is very much believed to be the victim of that bite, and it was Fredbear who of course did the biting. We see this take place in a cutscene featured in FNAF 4. While Crying Child doesn't seem to have been stuffed into the animatronic suit like other victims, at least from what we know. I don't think Cece ever ends up stuffed in that suit unless we've never seen that before. Part of their brain was, however, lost in the bite, which would mean that there was some flesh left behind to imbue the suit with their spirit. Of course, would that be enough flesh to imbue with the spirit? That's a topic for debate. Number 1. Nightmare. Regardless of whether or not you believe there are multiple Golden Freddys or multiple Fredbears, which are perhaps all Golden Freddys, it seems very likely that Fredbear is Nightmare, or that Nightmare is meant to represent Fredbear. If the Nightmare animatronics are more manifestations of fear and not real physical animatronics. If FNAF 4 is all about Crying Child, like many believe, who is critically injured by Fredbear and later dies of his injuries, then it makes sense that one of the scariest animatronics in the games, Nightmare, is meant to represent Fredbear. Ergo, these animatronics become one and the same.
FNAF 4 remains one of the most confusing points for FNAF theorists. Scott has even gone on the record to say that nobody has quite figured it out. But one of the questions I see debated the most is if FNAF 4 is really a dream or if it's real. Especially since Dako commented on a Reddit post from Scott saying that he doesn't know why people still think that FNAF 4 is a dream. So since I feel personally attacked now, despite this comment being posted prior to this channel becoming FNAF themed, I still think we'll settle this debate once and for all. The main reason behind Dako saying this is seemingly because of the sister location location Easter egg, the one where the security code of 1983 gives you the security camera footage of a closet, hallway, and bed from the FNAF 4 house. This to Dako, among others, is proof that the FNAF 4 house is an actual location rather than a construct of the mind. But I have a point that does indeed counter the whole "the cameras are real" idea. Since Scott was just using this as a way to confirm the year that FNAF 4 takes place in, we can easily write it off as just a figment of our imagination, or even just an Easter egg that has nothing to do with the actual story. On the contrary, the layout of what looks to be the FNAF 4 house is on the camera mini-map while we're in sister location as well, meaning that the cameras actually have somewhere to point to. So, which is it? Is FNAF a nightmare, or is it real? And things are more complicated than that, unfortunately. We know for a fact that at the very least the FNAF 4 minigames are real. The cutscenes we see play out between nights in an 8-bit style. However, the main gameplay is tricky, since while yes, this could be a real location, it's not the crying child's house. We can see from the 8-bit minigames that the layout for the house with the animatronics is different from the one that we see in the 8-bit minigame. There is no hallway with 4 doors, crying child's room doesn't have a door on either side, and he doesn't have a closet at the foot of his bed. So if the house's layouts don't match, how could the events we see in game be happening in real life? No room in the house matches the layout from what we see. Even if William had cameras in the area like that again, it could just be an Easter egg to explain the fact that FNAF 4 takes place in 1983, since that was a huge debate. Scott also says that there is a discrepancy in sister location that he has yet to clear up, or at least had yet to clear up at the time of him posting that Reddit thread. So the discrepancy could be that the cameras were actually just an Easter egg rather than, real cameras. More interestingly, the actual layout of the FNAF 4 room is more similar to the layout of an emergency room than a bedroom. See, bedrooms are typically laid out with one door as a safety measure, since you're unconscious in a bedroom. However, hospital rooms are more likely to be laid out with a door on either side to allow for easier access in case of emergency, especially in critical care. If nobody is on one side, it is more likely that someone is on the other side and can get to you in case of an emergency, and luckily that side has a door. Along with the long halls and the representations of death coming after you, FNAF 4 seems to be a perfect allegory for a hospital room, especially with the Easter eggs of IVs, pills, and flowers. But you can have all those at home, I can hear you yelling at me in the comments. Yes, but if a child is actually injured so bad that he needs blood IVs, then I don't think the hospital is gonna let him go home anytime soon, especially when he's still in a coma. There is also the point of the flatline that we hear at the end of the game. Like, there wouldn't really be a heart monitor at home. It's a child. And especially if it's a child, like even if the family is absolutely rolling in that cash money, I don't think the hospital would let him go home. I don't think that's a thing. Then there's the idea of the illusion discs from the Twisted Ones novel that can also explain the nightmare animatronics. However, even if that is the case, it doesn't explain the change in location or design between houses. That would still be explained by the theory that FNAF 4 is simply a dream. It also ties itself together with Ultimate Custom Night that way, since William is also in a coma, which only adds to the idea that Crying Child is the one that you should not have killed, but that's not what this video is about. As well as the nightmare animatronic lines from Ultimate Custom Night. These could also be interpreted both ways, to be fair. Like, this time there is more than an allusion to fear could mean that they were merely figments of Crying Child's imagination and now they're real, or that they were an actual illusion. And I am given flesh to be your tormentor could actually mean that now he's a real animatronic instead of an illusion attached to a fun time, or it could mean that he is given a body by the one you should not have killed, since last time he had no form because he was a dream. There also seems to be more lines trending towards dream than actual physical beings, since the illusion disc would need something to change the appearance of, meaning that they could actually hurt the player, but they just didn't.